In this episode, we talk about a former personnel of the Indian Navy and a murder accused who was presumed to be dead for 19 years. We also talk about why wine consumption has increased in India since the pandemic. But first, we talk about how Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan is going to come back to power. Hi, I'm Rahel Philipose, and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. With the Madhya Pradesh Assembly elections less than a month away and people eager to see a change in power, Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan of the BJP is hoping that a recently launched scheme will help him emerge victorious in the polls. The scheme is the Ladli Behna Yojana, under which poor women in the 21 to 60 age group receive 1,250 rupees every month.
बेटियों के बिना ये दुनिया नहीं चल सकती और इसलिए बहनों और भाइयों मध्य प्रदेश की धरती पर सबसे पहले हमने बनाई लाडली लक्ष्मी योजना, क्योंकि मुझे पता था कि बेटी जब तक बोझ रहेगी दुनिया बेटी को पैदा नहीं होने देगी, और इसलिए मैंने तय किया बेटी को बोझ नहीं रहने देंगे, बेटी को वरदान बनाएंगे.
And now, even though women constitute a significant voter base for Chauhan, many of his party members don't think this is a great idea. To understand why this is the case and what the scheme means for the women in the state, my colleague Shashank Bhargava speaks to the Indian Express's Anand Mohan in this segment.
Anand, begin by telling us what has been the main objective behind launching the Ladli Behna Yojana.
So we must understand that the Ladli Behna Yojana, which was released in Madhya Pradesh, one of the main reasons what the BJP party insiders have been saying behind the scheme is to beat the anti-incumbency which has been plaguing Shivraj Singh Chauhan. He has been in power for 18 years. The last elections, the BJP had in fact lost. But after a brief stint out of power, they came back to power after Congress leader Jyotiraditya Scindia had mounted a rebellion and broke away from the party and joined the BJP. And Shivraj Singh Chauhan found himself back at the CM seat. But the anti-incumbency, which was a main factor in the 2018 elections as well, never really went away. And this was the BJP's trump card in which the state pays 1,200 rupees to women from the age groups of 21 to 60. And this has ensured that the base of women voters remain firmly within the BJP.
And what does one have to do to qualify for this scheme?
So you have to ensure that the family income of the household doesn't exceed rupees 2.5 lakh a year, and this category of women it's a substantial voting bloc in Madhya Pradesh. So far, if the finance department is telling us that 6,800 crore has been disbursed to over 1.2 crore Ladli Behenas. And if you just look at what the election commission has been telling us, it says that around 48% of the 5.52 crore voters in the state are women. And if you look at it out, at least in 18 out of the 230 seats in the assembly, they are tribal dominated areas where women voters outnumber men. And this coupled with the fact that there's a substantial number of women who've been included into the new voting rolls makes them a very important voting bloc that both parties have been trying to vie for.
Right, and in that regard, it would make sense for Chauhan to launch this scheme. But what is the reason that some leaders within the party are hesitant about this move?
See, you must understand that, first of all, this sort of differs from the central leadership party line where Prime Minister Narendra Modi and several senior BJP leaders have been pushing back against what they call the Revdi culture. We know that there are handouts as poll promises which have taken place in many states. Karnataka is a very recent example of this, where the Congress party had promised several popular schemes for the public, and we see the same example in Delhi, where the Aam Aadmi party has implemented on its poll promises, and you have the Prime Minister routinely attacking against this sort of culture. And it is said that there were several central leaders who were not so keen on this, on going all in into the scheme, because if you just look at it, like over a 3 lakh crore public debt the Madhya Pradesh government has, and under the severe financial strain, we are sort of the government is still finding the money to pay for the scheme. So there's a little unease within the party over this.
And Anand, you spoke to some of the women in the state regarding the scheme. What do they have to say about it?
So I traveled around Sihor and Raisen districts. I mean, this is the area of influence of Shivraj Singh Chauhan, and I wanted to see that in his areas of influence, what do the women voters think, and what has been reflected in the internal BJP surveys is also something that we saw in these areas. We saw that women who come from extremely poor backgrounds have really found some amount of support in this scheme. If you especially look at it in the case of women who survive on a salary of 150 to 200 rupees for 8 to 12 hours of work, back-breaking work in a day. For them, it's like 4 to 5 days salary, which they get into their bank accounts every month. And the more women you have in the family, the more you're benefited. This scheme, apart from the government's decision to sell LPG gas cylinders as rupees 450, have really alleviated some of the hardships that these women were going through. It is extremely difficult for women to have a decision-making power in the household. But now with the money coming into their bank accounts, they have a greater say in the decision-making power in the household. They are able to buy small things for their children. They're able to buy stationery items for their children. They're able to save up money. They're able to plan ahead. They're able to buy a sewing machine, perhaps to set up their own small shop. There have been some women who have set up their own tea stalls. There are women who've paid back loans, and there are also women for whom this is like a pocket money for some women. They buy small makeup kits, they buy chocolates for their children, they buy shirts. So earlier they had to depend on their own salary and that of the main breadwinner of the home. But now this gives money to their pockets, and it sort of empowers many of the women who especially come from impoverished backgrounds.
And Anand, when talking about the scheme, could you talk about how the opposition Congress has reacted to it?
So the Congress party was sort of alarmed early on when Chauhan had announced the scheme, and when he began transferring money over to the women, and he sort of kept his promise. So Kamal Nath came up with his own rival Nari Samman Yojana in May, where he promised 1500 rupees per month and also LPG gas cylinder at rupees 500. And then Chauhan sort of took this challenge head on, and he hiked the monthly payout to 1250 rupees and has been in his rallies promising to raise it to rupees 3000 in the future. And Chauhan has to really compete for the chief minister's chair because he has not really been declared as a CM candidate. Now there are multiple faces, as there are 3 union ministers, there are 4 Lok Sabha MPs and 1 national general secretary who are in the fray. So of late you see Shivraj Singh Chauhan be very emotional, and he is really targeting women voters. He washes their feet, he showers them with petals, he tells them that he's the face of empowerment, that God has sent him to empower women in Madhya Pradesh. He delivers kitchen humor, if you could call it that. He'll crack like these mother-in-law and daughter-in-law jokes, and it's basically the conversations which happen in the kitchen to sort of make his point about how he is going to sort of like help alleviate the difficult times that they're going through.
बेटा बेटी दौड़ के आ जाए माँ की गोदी में और कहे माँ मेरी फिराक फट गई, मुझे दूसरी फिराक दिला देना। अब माँ की इच्छा होती है कि अपनी बिटिया को फिराक दिला दे, लेकिन पास पैसे नहीं होते। तो बताओ, आंखों में आंसू आते कि नहीं आते? अरे आते कि नहीं आते? मन में लगता है कि नहीं कि काश मेरे पास पैसे होते तो मैं मेरी बेटी को कपड़े दिलाती।
We know that there's price rise in the country, and women have been bearing the brunt of it. Especially poor households have been bearing the brunt of it. The Congress party, right after it saw that, that on the ground, the feedback is that the women are sort of like getting this money. The mama image is solidifying in their minds. And then the Congress party, of course, will have to win the elections to transfer the money. So they thought that the ground was slipping beneath their feet. So after taking a lot of consultations, Priyanka Gandhi very recently in her rally announced the Padho or Padhao scheme, in which they're going to give free education to school-going children along with a monthly stipend, which the Congress party now has been saying is going to be a game changer.
And next we talk about a murder accused who was presumed to be dead for 19 years. The man in question, Balesh Kumar, served as a steward in the Indian Navy. When we spoke to the Indian Express's Arnabjit Sur, he said that Balesh had retired from the Navy in 1996.
And he started driving a truck that was registered in his brother's name. So after retirement, he switched to transporting goods interstate.
And it was during his stint as a truck driver in 2000 that Balesh, with the help of his father and another person called Rajesh, committed a high-profile burglary at the Kota House in Delhi, the former residence of the Maharaja of Kota. All 3 of them were arrested in the case and were later released on bail. Now, 4 years later, in 2004, Balesh found himself in trouble again. This was a murder case.
A murder case where he killed one of the persons who was involved in a theft case with him, which was Rajesh alias Khushiram. He killed him over some verbal scuffle in outer Delhi. Basically, they were having liquor and then some scuffle happened and he killed him, strangulated him along with his brother, after which they fled the spot.
Shortly after the killing, Balesh and his brother realized that they needed to cover their tracks to evade the police. And to accomplish this, they acted upon an idea that they had watched in the movies.
So basically what police officers told me, like in 1990s, most of these movies had these things like you pretend to be dead all the while and later you just keep stay in hiding. He thought that the police will never get to know which. So what he did was he picked up two random laborers from Samepur Badmi. There is a transport depot there. So basically he said that, come, I'll give you some construction work. Basically he lured them. He lured them with some opportunities and he lured them with alcohol. So they started drinking and then he parked his truck in a corner, while he was on the way to the apparent destination. These two guys were sitting in the back of the truck and there were cardboard boxes. Basically the truck stored some cardboard boxes, some of it was there, and of course it was inflammable. So he poured kerosene all the while and then he burned the whole truck, including these two persons who were charred to death. Now, he did this why? Because first, he wanted people to think that he was one of the persons who died.
After setting the truck on fire, Balesh fled the scene. And a few days later, his father identified one of the charred bodies as that of his son.
That's what the official record sort of accepted because there were no DNA testing of such. This incident happened in Jodhpur. The Rajasthan police basically thought that this was the body of Balesh only because of course his father has testified that this is my son. No other tests were apparently carried out.
In fact, the Delhi police, who were also searching for Balesh in connection with theft and murder cases, took Rajasthan police on their word. And his family also presented a death certificate in court.
So obviously the burglary case of Tilak Marg and the murder case of Outer Delhi where Rajesh alias Khushiram was involved, that basically stood null because once you produce a death certificate, the case can't go on technically. This happened and basically all the insurance papers, like the insurance for truck, of course it's one time, but still the insurance for the truck and basically the Navy insurance. So they got money from there also. Apart from the pension, of course, that was anyway there that he was receiving after 1996 when he retired also. But the wife got all these things in her name so that she can get the money. At the same time, he's in hiding and the police aren't able to catch him.
At the time when the police thought he was dead, Balesh managed to create a new identity. He took on a new name, Aman Singh, and even got new Aadhaar and PAN cards made.
So he kept in hiding. He drove another truck in Punjab. Basically, he was a truck driver some time after while he was in hiding and everybody thought he was dead. And coming to his family, his father, his wife, he has 3 children now. Everybody pretended that he was dead and they made his fake death certificate and all the while knowing that where he's, basically all of them were co-conspirators.
But his life under a new name came to an end last month when the Delhi Police's crime branch got a tip-off that Balesh was living in southwest Delhi with his wife and 3 children. Shortly after, the police team went there and arrested him.
So, of course, their sons are being questioned as to if they had any idea about this or anything. The wife is at large. Their raids are being carried out to arrest the wife. Also, the Delhi police has written to the Rajasthan police to reopen the case regarding the death of the 2 laborers because ideally it was negligence on the part of the Rajasthan police to assume that one of the body was Balesh's. So basically he's involved in 4 cases. Once the wife is there, the wife will be taken into custody, but it's just that she's absconding right now and Balesh is in 10 days police custody of the Delhi police. So right now questioning is ongoing on if he's involved in any other cases and they are trying to ascertain the identity of the 2 laborers also because honestly Balesh also does not confessing a lot about them because he just picked them up randomly. So I think the thing that will go ahead from this case is the investigation regarding the bodies of the 2 men because of course they were just random laborers that he picked just to fake his death.
And in the end, we talk about India's wine consumption. Indian winemakers, who once struggled to compete with rum and whiskey enthusiasts, have now seen a sudden surge in wine consumption. And this surge coincided with the pandemic. Before the pandemic, Indians used to consume approximately 2.5 million cases of wine per year. However, since the pandemic, this figure has risen to 4.5 million cases per year. nearly twice as much. When we spoke to the Indian Express's Parthasarathi Biswas, he noted that this increase is an intriguing phenomenon.
We see that the drink of the elite is now being consumed by everyone else. And it helps that it is a kind of an agribusiness. And at the end of the day, it brings you revenue in the rural sectors because of the tourism and other things. So maybe we are in for some very exciting and new things that are going to happen in India.
And to understand the reasons why wine is seeing such a boost in India, my colleague Utsa Sarmin speaks to Partha in this segment.
So Partha, can you begin by telling us why we are seeing such a boom in wine consumption in India?
Well, the boom in wine consumption, vineyards and most of the wine makers told me is because of its image. Wine is not considered as an alcoholic drink. It's more of a social drink. During the pandemic, when everything was shut, people could not consume or would not have liked to consume alcohol in a social or in a family gathering. And in that case, wine was supposed to be a sophisticated and almost a non-alcoholic drink. Obviously, it helps. The alcohol percentage in wine is much lesser than, say, that in rum or in whiskey. And it was supposed to be a very social drink and a family-friendly drink. And that's how people started experimenting with wine instead of other hard drinks. And then slowly and steadily, they started consuming more and more wine. Now, once you get a taste of wine and once you develop a fondness for it, you tend to repeat the same thing over and over again. And this consumption of wine and the doubling of the consumption of wine also has a lot of hard work behind it. The winemakers of India has been toiling since the last many years, and at last they are seeing the fruit of their labor. People have been traveling abroad. They have been introduced to good wine. They got to taste the international culture. They got to see the international wines. And so it slowly and steadily, the culture of wine has seeped into India. And as I mentioned earlier, the pandemic had a major role to play in this, and people have started consuming wine more and more.
Right, and apart from this, we understand that the health benefits of wine are also being seen as one of the reasons for this surge, right? Now, the doctors you have spoken to, what do they have to say about these benefits?
So, two things. The doctors I spoke to a cardiologist in Pune. The cardiologist was of the opinion that wine, if consumed moderately, that is 1 glass for a lady and 2 glasses for a gentleman a day, can really have some good benefits. It helps you to lower your blood pressure and helps you to keep your lipid in control. In case your lipid profile is haywire, it can help you to keep it controlled. Of course, wine can also mellow down your mood. It's kind of a mood elevator also. Overall, wine is supposed to be good for the cardiovascular health. And if you ask some of the wine drinkers, and the age of the wine drinker has come down significantly. So I spoke to some of the wine drinkers who are in their late 30s or early 40s. They said that they prefer wine than any other drink because it has lesser calories than, say, whiskey or vodka. And it is combined with the cardiovascular health that wine gives to you or supposed to give to you. It is something which they are more comfortable in consuming.
Right, and earlier you have mentioned how the wine culture has been growing in India. But, pairing food with alcoholic beverages is something that is not really common here. However, the experts you have spoken to have said that wine can actually help with Indian cuisine. So talk to us about what they have to say on this matter.
Now, the hard work of winemakers is something which has come to fore in this context. For the longest possible time, you always paired wine with cheese or a cracker with wine. But now wine, especially Indian wine, can be had with, say, something like lal mas or bhajis or fritters. So how does that work? Wine pairing is a science of its own. You have to pair the right kind of wine with the right kind of food. Now that, if you talk about the European context, it is always pasta, something light, something in white sauce, which will go with the red wine. But the main fact that many winemakers spoke to me about was that you need to have a flat wine with a very spicy food. The Indian food that we consume has a lot of variety in it. The spice level in it is something very high. We have a lot of things playing on our palate when we are having something like, say, sambar or something like, say, red meat. So how do you pair a wine with it? There is a simple rule of thumb. The wine has to be a sparkling, simple one, and which will pair very well with your spicy food. Winemakers in Nashik, winemakers in Akluz, that's in Solapur, they have been introducing and pairing and talking about how Indian food goes well with a wine. And this kind of wines that are being produced in India, they go pretty well with the normal cuisine. So in Nashik, I spoke to Sula, and one of the most favorite dish of theirs is wine with kanda bhaji, that's the onion fritters. They say that already there is a lot of fat in the kanda bhaji, that is a very fat heavy food. So a very flat and very refreshing and bubbling red wine goes well with it. Over the years, Indian cuisine has been paired well with Indian wine or any wine in particular. And the myth that wine can only be had with, say, European or continental cuisine is broken in India. More and more people are now consuming wine with their normal day-to-day food.
But wine has traditionally been seen as an elite drink as opposed to something like beer. So with this shift in culture, have we seen such a shift in that mindset as well?
Obviously it has, and the pandemic has helped a lot in this. The average age of wine drinkers has come down significantly. Obviously, if you have to have the whole wine experience, that is wine in a cut glass goblet, you have to have that candlelight or that nice decor, you can have it. But for the beginner, you can have wine straight out of a can. This was first experimented by the Sula vineyard, but it did not really take off very well. But then slowly other winemakers have started experimenting it. Now wine in a can is a concept is not very new, but it's quite new in India. However, you would have never realized that wine can be consumed straight out of a can, like say beer. So for the young person who is on the move, who has already been introduced to wine, he or she would like to have something with his meal which he or she can carry. So wine in a can is something that they introduce. These cans are normal oxidized iron cans so that it does not interfere with the taste or the texture of the wine, and it is something very easy to consume. Also, they have the image that wine is for the elite drinkers, for the so-called bourgeois, has also been broken during the pandemic. A lot of people got introduced to wine and they realized wine as a drink really does not need all the paraphernalias. Winemakers of Nashik and other parts of India, they have worked on this a lot, and at last that thing has fructified, I would say.
And Partha, because you mentioned that Nashik had played a major role in making wine a viable industry in India, so could you tell us about the kind of contributions it has had on India's wine production?
Nashik and grapes go hand in hand. Now, if you look at Nashik's soil is sandy, loomy soil, and they have long winters. There is ample water available and not too much water for something water guzzling like, say, paddy or anything else. Grapes were introduced in Nashik as a cash crop somewhere early 70s, and it helped a lot. In the early 1990s and 1980s, the wine culture started coming in, and obviously Nashik was the first one to experiment with it. At present, you have around 6,000, 7,000 acres of vineyards which grow grapes only for wine, and these vineyards, they have their own set of F&B outlets, because in India you cannot advertise alcoholic drinks. So to introduce people to their drinks, to introduce people to their wine, they have a whole package kind of thing. So you come to their vineyards, you see how the grape is grown, you taste their wine, you taste the food that is there. It's almost like a one-day outing or a couple of days outing. Sula obviously has been the first one to introduce this, and the Sula Fest, which is their annual musical festival, is a very prominent feature in the cultural calendar of India. Overall, the culture of wine is closely associated with the culture of wine tourism in India, and that's how they introduce and they let more and more people to taste their wine and also have their F&B business which grows.
Right, and could you talk about the kind of policies that the government has adopted that have helped boost wine production in India?
Before 2001, wine was taken as an Indian-made foreign liquor, and it had a very steep excise duty. But wine then was bracketed into agri-produce, like other agri-producers, and then it got a lot of leeways in terms of lesser excise duty, lesser restrictions on sales and other things, and it helped the winemakers of India a lot. Well, there was a proposal in Maharashtra to allow the sale of wines in normal departmental stores, but that was shelved because of opposition. Wine is at present taken as a agro produce, and the even government of Karnataka has given them a lot of holiday. The government of Uttar Pradesh and other places have also given a lot of leeway growth of vineyards and viticulture, that is the study of vineyards which produce wine. And that's how the governments, both state and central government, has allowed the processing of grapes into wine and have given them a lot of tax benefits and other things.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. It was hosted by me, Rahel Philipose, and written and produced by Utsa, Sarmin and Shashank Bhargava. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone who you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.